Hi guys, it's Down Under Monkey and welcome to this week's feature lock. This week I'm having a look at the Fortress CL interlock. This was requested by Keyless Entry. He's got one of these. He wants to have a pick of it, but he wants to know what's going on first. I did ask last week if anyone had any suggestions for locks. Leave some comments. His was the first one with an actual request, so we'll have a bit of an in-depth look at this today. What it does, what's inside, and what not to do. So it is a giant disc detainer. It's actually very good to learn how to pick a disc detainer. Inside there's all your discs. Huge big open keyway, so you can see right down the bottom and what's going on in there. And the key itself is actually pretty monstrous on its own, so I'll give you a key as a comparison. That's an Alloy Protect key, so there's a massive difference between those. And if you get the Alloy, so much room for activities. You probably fit about 4 of them in there. Put it next to a standard key, I suppose. Not everyone's got an Alloy. There's a standard C4 key next to it. Huge. So, a little bit of history on this. This is a mechanical interlock. So what normally happens is there's a latch, maybe on a sliding gate, that slides into here. It's on an area where you need restricted access, high-speed conveyors or machinery of some kind, where you shouldn't have someone in there without other people knowing that you're there. So basically what would happen, this is a modular system, so this is the head unit that the latch goes into. There's normally another one of these locks on the bottom with a key. What you would do if you're going to service the machinery, you shut it down, put your key in, turn it. It allows you to turn this key back and pull it out. Then the latch will open, so you can go inside the gate and do whatever you do. People cannot physically close that and make the machinery run unless this key is put back in there, turned 90 degrees, and the other key turned back and pulled out. You cannot pull any of the keys out without the other key being in the locked position. This one is an exception because it's modified. Now, if you're going to try and pull this apart, let me just tell you, don't bother, because it's very, very difficult and you will damage the lock. These are all roll pins that have been punched in, and there is no through section. They've been punched in one way and then are not intended to get back out. Same on the lock body here. There's one on that side. There's one on that side. It does not pass straight through. These are these are separate on each side. So unless you can pull those out, it's very difficult to get this lock apart. Now, I do have another one of these that I already stripped down. Unfortunately, I had to cut away some of the lock body and cut away some of the body here, but from all intents and purposes, it still works. I'll bring it over. That's the lock body on its own. If I flip it upside down, you can see when you turn your key, it turns the base, which generally interacts with the little cams that are underneath here. Let me just grab that one back and show you how the little cam works. So as that cam slides backwards and forwards, it's actually attached here with these 2 screws to the next unit. When you turn it, it allows you to lock it and unlock it. So, disc detainer, inside here. For those of you who don't want to destroy their locks, but still want to know what's inside there, I have prepared one for you. Let me just change the camera down a little bit, and we can get stuck into it. So, once you remove your 4 roll pins from the side, this top face plate will come off. So I'm going to take the key out, make sure that's zeroed. Yep. Always try and remember how your stuff goes back together. easiest way, I'm about to pull this to pieces. I'm going to draw a line here and a line here. I can always rub that off later, but now I know that's the way that this lid goes back on. Simple tricks for dismantling and putting back together. So when I pull the top off, gently, you can see under there, the key does nothing with the faceplate. It doesn't interact with the faceplate at all. It's merely just a faceplate to keep everything together. Again, when you're pulling things apart, put them in an order that you're going to remember to put them back. So, looking inside, what have we got? I might turn that light off, see if that helps out a little bit. Not really. Sorry guys, the light's a bit strange. So you've got a couple of spring washers just sitting on top there. We don't want those bouncing all over the place, because I'm pretty sure you can't just go to Bunnings or your local hardware store to get things like that. So I'm just going to place them in order, left to right, and if I run out of room, I'll start left to right underneath. So inside, you can see, let me get a pointer. Down here, you've got, that's actually molded onto, not that, inside here, you have like a little cup that everything sits in. So everything sits inside this main body, but it also sits inside a cup in there. I'll pull it out soon and I'll show you. Actually, what if I just do that now? Then you might understand what I'm gibbering on about. So inside the actual body itself, if I pull that out, being careful, there's your sidebar. Okay, so it's like a normal disc detainer. I'm just going to pop that down. Hope things don't fall out. And the sidebar normally sits in its own little groove just there. And obviously when you line your key up and turn it, the sidebars line up into a groove, drop down into the cylinder, and that's where you can get your rotation. So there's nothing else in there, just that one groove for the sidebar. Try and get that a bit closer. There you go. Okay, so I'll put that over there, I know where that goes. So there's your sidebar, no problem. It's still protruding out at the moment because there's no key in there and it's not turned to where it needs to be. So if I put my key in there and turn it, you can see the sidebar drop down and back up, down and back up. Okay, so the top disc is trying to run away on me. So what I'm going to do for now, I'm going to take out the sidebar just so I don't lose it. Put him over there, and we can go through the stack now and show you what's in there. So that first bit I showed you down here is fixed to this cup that everything sits in, so that doesn't come out. You just have that one element up here, the sidebar, and there's your stack. So if I put my key in there now, you'll see when I turn it, you might not see that way, everything lines up and the sidebar drops in. When it turns back, it forces the sidebar up and locks it against the outside of the cylinder. So this is a great lock to learn disc detainers because there's plenty of room to look, nice and open. Right, so first one is just a spacer, nothing special about that. What I'll do is I'll put them here, oopsie, put them here so you can see them. I'll give a bit of a close-up on this in a minute, and there's our first disc. Now if I get my pointer back, now the slots around here get progressively bigger or smaller depending on the bitting on the key. So this profile is the same on every disc it's only this slot length that changes to give you the open. So if I turn that disc on its own, that's where that one has to go to. Sorry, back a touch. That's now lined up with where the sidebar lines up. So you can, these would be difficult to pick if you were trying to feel the end of that slot, because this one's not at the end, it's right in the middle, and that's lined up with the sidebar. So I'm going to pull that disc out, put it next in my line in the direction it's going to go back in. Down underneath that, you've got another spacer. Come on, everything's got oil in there, so it sticks together pretty well. Bit of suction. And there's our next disc, and it's fairly similar with the slot length here, but I can only turn it, let's see, that far before it lines up with the sidebar, which is that gap there. So let's pull that disc out, put them in line. I've actually got to make myself a disc detainer pinning tray, if that's what you'd call it, disking tray. Does that sound right? But these would be useless in there anyway, because they're much bigger than every other disc. These are just spacers. They just stop the discs from rubbing hard on each other. Again, the next disc, if I turn that around a bit till it matches up with the sidebar slot, you can see it's almost all the way to the end of this one this time. So they do vary. Put that there. What I'll do actually, why don't I get two of these discs? Oh, don't fall, don't fall. I'll put them together with the profiles matched. So you can see the slots are very slightly out. Oops. Okay, the slots are very, very slightly out. But up here, where it lines up with the sidebar, are completely different. So they need to be like that for the sidebar to drop in. You can see that the profiles don't line up anymore. That matches up with the bitting on the key. So there you go. And hopefully I'm putting those back down in the right order. But we will find out shortly. Actually, let's put that back together now and see what it does. Yes, that is the right order, because I've just turned it and all of the sidebar slots line up correctly. So let me pull that disc out, put it back. Worst case, I've only got to swap two of them over, as opposed to going through the whole stack and going, ooh, don't know which one was which. Another spacer. Right. We got there 7. Right, and here's your next one. So that didn't have to move much at all before the little slot lined up. But you get the picture. Okay, I don't know really what these notches are in the disc, because there's nothing else to bind up on, unless this is some sort of a manufacturer's code for the discs, or potentially some sort of anti-picking device. So but they can only move that far, and if you look inside here, there's nothing for those to catch on. So I'm thinking more along the lines of a manufacturer's code for the number on the disc. I guess one way we can try and find that out. The code is actually on the key, 40333021. That's the bitting on the key for 12033004. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 discs out at the moment. So when I pull the next one out, I'll see if they match, and that might be the code on the disc. An easy way for the manufacturer to identify the discs in manufacturing, or in assembly, not manufacturing. So these discs will be, okay, so the profiles are the same, the cutouts are the same, and they both have 3 notches in the corner, the 2 notches on that side, and the 2 notches on that side. So you would likely say that they are identification marks for assembly, as opposed to some sort of anti-picking. Let's move along. There's another spacer, another disc. I've got a whole bunch of stuff coming out at the moment. Another disc, another spacer, another disc. Oh, sorry, I'm doing that all off camera. Right. Looking at it now, actually, just pulling that last disc out, that was disc number 4 on the key code. Got 4 notches in the bottom corner. The one previously was a 0, this cut here. There are no notches on the bottom corner. 3 and 3 have 3 notches and 3 notches. Then we have another 0, which has nothing, a 2 and a 1. So these are identification marks for assembly. The discs are actually numbered. So I guess if you wanted to rekey this with another key, you could potentially just put in the discs that match the bitting. Well, that's handy. And last but not least, after this spacer, is this disc. Now, this disc is where you tension from. So once your key is all the way down in, it fits nicely in that profile. There's a little bit of slop, but then it actually turns. Okay, so this is the disc you need to tension off, the very bottom one. If I drop that back in there, not drop it, how about I place it, you can see that the notch lines up with this section. And when I put my key in there, regardless of the sidebar or not, you can tension the whole core off that bottom disc. So if you were going to try and pick these, what you'd want is a profile that sits snugly in there, and then I guess you would work your way back, turning the other discs until they aligned. Nifty. And down the bottom is nothing. It's just like a little cup, I guess, for dirt and grime to fall in and not chunk up the whole lock. So there you have it. That's the internals of the Fortress lock. I'm going to go and put this back together. If anybody needs any details, if you have one of these Fortress locks and you'd like some measurement details on this disc so you can make yourself a tensioning tool before you attempt, I'll get some details on this. I will only give it to you if you ask for it. I'm not going to go posting this information on anywhere public, I suppose. I don't want to get in trouble, and I don't want anyone else to get in trouble for the sake of, you know, a video or some photos. So basically all I'm doing is just putting them all back in, essentially just lining up the discs with each other so they sit directly on top, one by one. Oh, actually, I was going to give you a bit of a close-up on all of the discs together, just in case you learn something off it that I'm not telling you. So give me a sec. I'm just going to take my camera out of its holder. So there's all the discs. Starting from the lowest one, we're going to tension off all the way to the front cover disc, the spring washers and the cover plate and our sidebar. Pop this back in. Now we're getting on 20 minutes, so the video is already getting pretty long. So I'm going to beast mode this back together and wrap it up. But if anybody has any questions at all on these fortress locks, I'll do my best to answer. I have not picked this because I don't have a disc detainer pick big enough. None of the little ones will work. So I guess they're just going to have to be questions that I might be able to help you with. I will pick my other one eventually. Hopefully I'll see some other picking videos on some smaller channels. Maybe Keyless will have a crack at this now he's seen what's inside. Realise it's not that scary. Right, so that's all back together nice and neat. Now I'm going to put my key in there. Line up all the discs again. Hang on, something's wrong. There we go. Line up all the discs. Chuck in my sidebar, which is now flush. That last disc doesn't want to stay there. Pop that, line that straight back up with where that sidebar locks in. Turn it back, being careful not to drop the stack out. Put my two spring washers back on top. They don't orient in any particular way, as long as they're facing sort of like that. Grab your faceplate, and if you remember, we drew our line on the top of the cylinder. They only go two ways, that way or that way. Not that it matters which way they go, I just like to keep things the way I found them. There you go, back together. Chuck it in, still functions, still locks. Turn, lock. And there you go, the Fortress CL dismantled, identified and put back together. As I said, any questions, leave them in the comments or email me at downundermonkey.gmail@gmail.com and we'll see what we can do. If you need details on the tensioning disc down the bottom, let me know. Hope you enjoyed that video. We'll catch you next time.